Yeah, so let me just go ahead and introduce you. First of all, to those joining us, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. This is our second week of a three-part class series on personal finance basics. Lucas Donnelly is our teacher tonight, and he's our local expert on personal finance. This guy knows finance in and out. He did a phenomenal class last week that really kind of laid out some principles of really business principles of finance and how those principles apply to our personal lives. So basically, here's what experts, who know what they're doing in the field of business, here's how they look at their finances and handle their finances. So what can we learn from them? And so we're just so excited to have you here tonight and that you're joining us tonight. He's covering budgeting. When I think about budgeting, I have a budget. I keep my budget. But when I first kind of started to develop one, it felt so overwhelming to me to try to figure out where things needed to go and did I have the right numbers and so forth. And so I'm really excited for Lucas to be talking about this subject tonight and just explaining how to keep one, how to develop one, then how to keep one, and just bringing some wisdom to us about that subject. So this class is hosted by Redemption Community Church in Kirkwood. We meet at Kirkwood North Middle School normally when we're able to meet. Right now we're entirely online. You can watch our service at redemptionstl.com/online. So if you're joining us and you've never been to Redemption before, we would just love to extend that invitation to you. We'd love to have you join us some Sunday. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Lucas. I'll hop back on at the end. He'll answer questions that you have. I'll be monitoring the questions as the evening goes on and make sure that we get your questions answered. And you'll be getting an email following this with Lucas's PowerPoint. So you'll get all of his information. So I just want to kind of let you know, when I take classes, I feel like I need to write every single thing down. I don't want to miss anything. You're going to get this PowerPoint. So don't feel pressured to write down every word on the screen because you're going to have it at the end. So Lucas, I'm going to hand things off to you. I'm going to turn off my video and my microphone, and it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. And thank you everyone for joining the call here. Really excited this is like my hobby for some weird reason. I love personal finance. This is the kind of stuff that I did for a living for several years, and it's still kind of a passion of mine. So I wanted to first just share a few screens, a few slides that we reviewed last week, just to hopefully get everyone on the same page here. So last week, we talked about the fact that your family is just like a business. You have assets. Unfortunately, we all likely have liabilities. We have income, we have expenses, and we're all painfully aware of the cash that's coming in and out of our accounts every month. So that's not different. Like all of us have that true to different extents, different scales, different amounts. The difference is that the best companies, and I'd argue the best families, look at their business, look at their money like a business does. So last week we walked through an overview of what a balance sheet looks like. We talked about a profit and loss statement. We talked about what a cash flow statement is, just to set the stage for maybe a new foundation for those of you that haven't thought about budgeting your money or taking control of your finances. We wanted to give you a foundation to work with, and that's the most kind of basic, strongest foundation you can build in terms of thinking about your finances. So this week, particularly relevant is the P&L, the profit and loss statement, because we're going to be talking about the foundations of a strong budget. And a budget very simply goes into your P&L. So if you remember, a profit and loss statement, it is equal, your family profit is equal to all of your income minus all of your expenses. So income meaning salaries, checking, savings, interest, any income you have from your investments. If you have a side hustle, maybe you're doing photography, maybe you're a consultant or a counselor on the side. These are the types of things that you would consider income. And then you have your expenses bucket, where you have your fixed, mortgage, auto, student loans, utilities, those types of things that change, don't change at all or change very little month in, week out, or month in, month out. And then variable. So that's the stuff that you have the ability to choose what you're spending each month. So sounds very simple, but this is something that many families struggle with, in the fact that oftentimes their expenses exceed their income. So that's where a budget comes in. It's just what I want to talk about today. And I tried to make this super simple. I think this will actually be pretty quick. So I hope that you all have questions to ask along the way, but I wanted to give you just like, I didn't want to give you budget 201 or 301 or 401. I wanted to start with a good foundation that hopefully you feel comfortable reaching out to me, reaching out to someone at Redemption, that can help with this, because I don't want this to be too cumbersome for you. I found, even when I was working with JP Morgan, the biggest bank in the world with the richest clients in the world, a lot of people didn't put budgets in place because it's just stressful. People don't like the added their finances of what they're spending, and even when your income is exceeding your expenses, it's no fun. So what I wanted to do with this week is just give 4 fairly simple principles that will hopefully help you get a grasp around your finances. For a lot of people, my budget is honestly not much more complicated than this. So for a lot of people, this may do the trick for your family. For others, this may be the first step in the journey of kind of managing your personal finances. Maybe you have a more complicated path, a bigger struggle with your finances, and I would love to be able to help with that. So why I'm calling this a good but not stressful budget is very purposeful that I'm calling it that. So let me go through the first 4 principles here, and that's where we're going to spend the most the lion's share of our time this week. So one is a rule of thumb called the 50-30-20 rule, and this is widely accepted in the kind of personal finance world as the baseline for how many families should consider their budget. And I'll say this is a rule of thumb. So a rule of thumb is oftentimes not used literally. So what I don't want you to understand is that you have to, budget according to 50-30-20. You don't have to, but this is kind of a very helpful framework for you to think about and tweak along the edges. So the 50-30-20 rule simply states that of your after-tax income, so that's what actually comes into your checking account on the 1st and the 15th, if that's how you're paid, 50% of that should go to needs. And when you hear needs, think fixed expenses that we defined last and just a couple minutes ago. 30% should go to wants. So that's going out to eat, hanging out with your friends, going to the movies, if people go to the movies post-COVID. And then 20% should go to savings. And savings, kind of the definition that people share for the 50-30-20 rule, we'll talk about it more in depth in a little bit, is your debt payments and true savings. And I would add to that 50-30-20, within the 20 is where I think about charitable contributions. So if you go to a church, if you're part of a church, that's where your tithes would go. If you like a particular nonprofit, that's where your donations would go within that 20 bucket. And this 50-30-20 rule states that if you manage your finances in this manner, you should be able to be building wealth over time, which is the end goal here. The second thing that I think is super important and honestly a big piece of the stress is that people that haven't started automating their expenses, putting things on auto pay, as much as you can after you've figured out your fixed expenses, let's say after you've gone through this 50-30-20 process, which coming soon, I'm going to dig in here in a little bit. If you've kind of felt really good about your fixed expenses, that 50 portion of the bucket, um, automate that all. It's really, really stressful to have bills coming in that you have to log in and put in your checking account. It almost hurts more that you have to go through that work to do so. So one thing that I always try to say is anything that isn't excessive, that isn't kind of variable, I automate those expenses, which has been automated ever since I've had it. My car payments, my student loan debts, all those things are budgeted for and completely automated. So I can focus on improving the variable piece now that I feel like the fix is in a good place for my family. So after you've done that, what I think is extremely important, I think this is the kind of the most important thing we'll talk about, is to diagnose the variable expenses. Last week we talked about a phrase, measure what matters. Anytime there's something that's super important to you, you measure it. Like you check back in, you evaluate it over time. This is exactly how you should be looking at your budget. And oftentimes I find families kind of just go through life letting their spending happen to them, not realizing that the power is 100% in their hands to determine how much they're going to spend, how responsible or irresponsible they want to be. It's totally in your hands. So diagnosing that is super crucial to you improving your financial situation. The fixed expenses is the hardest thing. I don't imagine that many of you are going to get off this call and decide to sell your home because it falls outside of the 50% allocation for your needs, right? I don't think that's a very realistic expectation for this call. But what I do think is that many of you are going to be able to, after we've dug in here, look at your variable expenses and say, I eat out too much, or my entertainment budget is way too big, and in fact, it's not really a budget. I just spend whatever I want whenever I want to. That's honestly, whether it's someone that's worth, I've worked with people that are worth over $1 billion that, people say that the quickest way to become a millionaire is to start with $1 billion. I've seen that a bunch of times, where people just spend irresponsibly because they have it. And it's even worse when you're not in that type of financial situation. So diagnosing and really starting to measure your variable expenses is, I can't emphasize how important that is. And then lastly, this is the part that I want to say, like, good but not stressful. I want to emphasize that is that you should be budgeting your fun. So I don't care if you need draconian, strict austerity measures to get your financial situation in the place that it should be, so you can start saving money for your family, have something saved, so that you can afford an emergency or afford some sort of luxury down the road. If you're not budgeting your fun, anytime you do something nice, it's going to feel stressful. You're going to have to justify it. You're going to have to say a million reasons why you did that in your head. The type of person, and I've been this before at certain stages of my life, where anytime I was wearing a cool pair of shoes and someone complimented me, I had to tell them that I bought it at TJ Maxx. I felt like I had to justify the reason why I'm wearing a nice pair of shoes, because I shouldn't be. It's a guilt-inducing expense. And what I really want to get across, and what I want to encourage you to do, is no matter the situation you're in, if you can set up a budget that makes sense for your family, having a fun part of the budget is so freeing. You can set up, I don't even care if it's $25 a month for you to take your kids to Chick-fil-A for dinner, or to take everyone to the batting cages and have fun. If you budget that and require your family to use it, it's going to make budgeting a lot of fun because it's going to make it more freeing as opposed to restrictive. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that the mics aren't on. Please ask questions if this isn't super clear, but that's been one of the most freeing principles for me when I think about a budget is yes, it restricts your spending, but if you restrict your spending to, let's say, $100 a month towards whatever makes you really happy, whether it's buying whatever clothes or going out to eat with your spouse or whatever that might be, having that carved out and forcing yourselves to do it makes it a lot more fun than having to justify every single purchase that you make that isn't, necessary. So that's the high level framework, and that's the majority of what I kind of want to get across this week. But let's dig into the 50-30-20 concept a little deeper. So as I said, 50%, the 50 represents your needs, the 30 represents your wants, and the 20 represents your savings. What does that mean? Obviously, your needs are your fixed expenses plus a few variable, but it's the stuff that, you can't live without groceries. You can't live without, your car insurance. That's the type of stuff that I would bucket there, where your wants are all variable. None of your wants are going to be fixed expenses for the most part. And these are the things that you're going to be able to cut out pretty quickly. I imagine that many of you aren't thinking my house is too big. Maybe a couple of you are. Most of you are probably thinking I eat out too much, or maybe I don't need that gym membership that I never really use, or I've grown really accustomed to e-commerce throughout the COVID crisis, and I probably need to cut that off. I feel like that's where a lot of the lifestyle changes happen when I talk to other families about their budgets, and where I'd encourage you to be looking as well. So the highest priorities, what I would say for starting your budget, one is an emergency fund. So let's assume that you've taken your after-tax income. It's a super simple equation where you, your spouse, all of your income sources, you add it all up, whatever hits your checking account at the end of the month. You divide it by 2 to get your needs. You take 30% of that to get your wants, 20% to get your savings. I know many of your lives don't really look like that right now, but just setting the stage for what it theoretically could look like, I think is super important, because it's going to help you diagnose where you need to be. Let's assume that that's already done. You and your family have already thought through that. You've diagnosed the issue, and you know what changes need to happen. After you've done that, I would say the number one priority, I shared this last week, that the vast majority of American families do not have enough money in savings to cover an emergency. So a kid getting sick or breaking their arm, needing to take them to the emergency room, let's say you have a really high deductible health insurance plan. The vast majority of American families do not have enough in savings to even cover that, which, in my time at JP Morgan was a crisis. That's what the vast majority of our philanthropy dollars went towards, was helping lower to mid-income families with their savings. So if that's you, even if you're a high income family that just spends a lot more than you earn, creating an emergency fund is absolutely crucial to making any of the rest of this work. Because if you feel like you don't have the security of, what happens if I lose my job, or what happens if someone needs to go to the emergency room, it's going to be really hard to do the rest. So highly encourage you to do the math. What is the last, let's say, 3 months of your expenses? January, February, March, May. But let's just say you take a look at March, April, and May. You sum up those expenses and you create a goal to, over the next few months, have that number of dollars in your savings account. You will be amazed at the freedom that that gives you to do the rest, to invest, to pay down debt quicker than you thought you would, to make some changes in terms of your normal budget. It's going to be a big deal. Ashley just asked a question: how do you decide between 3 months or 6 months fund, or should end goal be 6 months? So it's kind of twofold. One component is your risk tolerance. So if you and your husband or you and your wife have really steady income, and maybe you're already saving maybe more than 20%, I would say you could go by without all the way up to 6 months of expenses. But the other function of that is, if you can, I would. If you are able to have 6 months saved up and continue saving from there, you're going to be pretty amazed at the freedom that gives you to make, I guess, more risks along the way. You're going to invest more money. You're going to feel like maybe you can quit the job that you hate to pursue something new. The more you have saved up, the more comfort you're going to feel to make those decisions. And then the other factor that I think matters a lot in determining the 3 to 6 month, the 3 or 6 month or somewhere in between number, is how variable your income is. If you have a really steady job, it's going to be easier for you to kind of predict what your expenses are, what your income is going to be, and you can kind of survive off less. But if that's really up and down, if you own your own business, if you're a freelancer, it's really a better idea to have more months of expenses saved up. And then, as someone, I know you have a lot of kids, there's a lot that could go wrong theoretically with kids. So having the ladder, aiming for 6 is a lot more helpful, just in case. If you have a lot of kind of variables with your expenses, where if, for some horrible reason, all 6 of your kids get the flu at the same time, that might be expensive. That might be running up your deductible. It's better to err on the side of caution, have more savings. I'm going through this just as a personal anecdote. I was always on the 3 month side, and I would invest the rest, because for the last several years I've been, double income, no kids, dink, me and my wife. So with no kids, we've kind of felt like 3 months was good enough. We're pretty young, so I feel like I could probably find a new job within 3 months if I were to lose it. We felt comfortable with that amount saved up. But now that we have a kid, so we have a 3-month-old child now, that has made me more conservative. And I now have a goal. I was at 4 months saved up. Now my goal is to get to 6 months of my expenses saved up by the end of this year, just in case, to manage that type of risk. So thank you. That's a great question. So we talked about this emergency fund. The second thing that I think is super important, and it's number 2 for a reason. If you don't have enough saved up, it's really hard to pay an extra dollar towards debt, because you feel like, gosh, what if something bad happens to me? This is going straight to my debt. I'm not going to be able to touch that money again. You get paralyzed when you don't have enough saved up. But certainly number 2 is getting bad debt under control. When I say bad debt, I'm not saying a mortgage. Okay, a mortgage at 3-4% is what I would consider good debt. It's something that hopefully your property is going to grow in excess of that or around that rate over time. And I'm not saying that you need to do all that you can to pay off your mortgage quicker than you need to. That's paralyzing. That's outside of the good budget. If you can, good for you. But that's good but stressful. I'm trying to be good but not stressful. So what I mean by bad debt, credit card debt, certainly. is considered bad debt. If you've accrued credit card debt, you want to pay that off immediately, because your interest rate is probably between 17 and 25%, and very few investments are ever going to return you more than 17 to 25% a year. You're going to have to take a lot of risk for that to be worth it. And just credit card debt can be crippling for a family. So let's say you've created your emergency fund, you feel comfortable with that. Any free dollar should go towards high interest debt. If you have student loans that are 6, 7, 8, 9%, which I've seen, I have some 6.5% student loans. That's when you want to start paying down as soon as you can. After you've done that, okay, that's where you start thinking about retirement contributions, with a caveat. If your company matches your retirement contributions, which many do, if you work for a larger company, many companies will say, we will contribute up to 3, 4, or 5% of your pre-tax income. Will match your contributions to your 401k. That is free money. If you aren't doing that, please start doing that now. Many people don't get started and get used to the certain amount of income that they have because they aren't contributing to the 401k. Please, if this is you, start matching those contributions, because that is free money from your company. I'm hoping that this 50-30-20 rule, or whatever that percentage ends up being for your family, allows you to do that, because it's essentially increasing your income and helping you build for retirement over time if you do that. So even if they don't match, after you have your emergency fund, you have your debt under control, retirement contributions are crucial. I've seen way too many people wait until the last minute, and that's come back to haunt them. And what I want to do, hopefully I can share my screen really quickly. I wanted to show a chart. So this is from JP Morgan. The benefit of saving early. This is from their Retirement Insights presentation that they do maybe once a year, where they share a few scenarios. So Susan invests $5,000 every year between the ages of 25 and 35. So just a few years out of undergrad, she starts contributing $5,000 a year. And that's over 10 years. That's 50 grand, okay? But then she stops at 35. Bill invests $5,000 every year between the ages of 35 and 65. So Bill started 10 years later than Susan and invested $100,000 more than Susan did, okay? And then Chris invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 65. So $5,000 every single year of his career. So he invests $200,000. Look at the dramatic difference in outcomes. You'll see that Susan, who only invested for 10 years, versus Bill, who invested for 30 years. So Susan only put $50,000 in that account, where Bill invested 3 times that. She ends up on top. By the time she retires, she has more money in her retirement account, but she invested 3 times less than him. That is a big deal that I want you to pay attention to. But the true story here is Chris. So look at Chris consistently investing $5,000 a year. And from when he starts his career to when he retires, and he's a millionaire. He's retiring with $1.1 million to live off of in his retirement, which is nearly twice as much. You could probably sum up Susan and Bill's contributions and have what Chris has to retire off of. It's that big of a deal. And oftentimes people don't really get it. So it's just this thing that gets pushed off from month to month, from year to year even. But look at this chart and see the importance of just investing consistently. And this is accounting for good markets, bad markets, um, uh, you know, different cycles over time. So hopefully that was as eye-opening to you as it was for me when I first saw these types of things. Okay, so that's the 50-30-20 primer. I'll try to hurry up here, so if there are any questions, we can get to those. The fourth one is pretty obvious. Remove your irresponsible wants. Any of the type of expenses that you just know you shouldn't be doing, that should be the next thing that you take out. That you replace with those retirement contributions. And then fifth, which I think is super important that not a lot of people think about, is your charitable bucket. If just like that same impact is made by investing throughout your career consistently, imagine the impact that you can make in your communities with the nonprofits that you like, with the church that you may be a part of, like Redemption. We hope you become a part of Redemption someday. Those types of contributions add up, and you can just imagine the impact that you would have. It looks a lot like Chris, his impact at the end of when he's 65. So I'd encourage you to think about that. So maybe you're looking at this and you're saying, Lucas, this is great, but you want me to do all this type of work, and that sounds stressful, and you told me this budget is good but not stressful. Please hear me when I ask you to say, let technology do the heavy lifting. There are apps. Last week I shared Mint and Clarity. That's from Clarity Money, which is the app that I use for my budget. This is not my budget. This is not my income. This is from their website, where I just showed 3 of the simple things that I usually look at each month. So on the far left, it shows you, it does the math for you. It just literally adds up all the money that came in for the month, and then it compares that to what you spent and shares how much is left over. So it doesn't get much more easy than that for you to diagnose how much you're making and how much you're spending. But then what's even better is in this middle screen where it shows categories for how much you've been spending. So you don't need to ever go line item by line item of your credit card statement or your bank account statement if you use things like Mint or Clarity or another good budgeting app out there, where many times I've looked at my shopping budget or my travel budget and thought, oh my gosh, I need to fix something. And if I didn't have a tool like Clarity, I probably wouldn't go through the rigorous effort of adding those things up. I would just sort of see the money leave and not do anything about it. And the last thing that's just super helpful is maybe you've diagnosed that you shop too much, but where do you shop? That $575 here on the bottom in the middle that person spent on shopping in September, you may not know where that was spent, and you don't know if some of that was buying school supplies for your child, something that I would say is quite necessary, versus buying a pair of shoes that you never needed. So you're able to, with a bunch of different online tools, even look down to how much you spent at a certain store. And this person may be saying, wow, that's a lot of pumpkin spice lattes. Maybe I can cut down on that and save some money over time. So that's just what I want to say, is this is a good but not stressful budget. And please don't, if you're leaving this call thinking, wow, this is stressful, please don't think that. Please reach out to me, because there are ways to do this that is not stressful. So hopefully I don't see any open questions in the Q&A. But let me just go back to the overview page before we wrap things up. 50-30-20 rule, super helpful rule of thumb. For you, it might be 40-40-20. It might be 40-50-10. It'll be different for every family, but I want you to think of it with this framework to kind of set your expectations for where you should set your goals. Because some of you may be 60-50-10. Um, I hope that this is a helpful framework to get you in a place where you can start building your savings. Automate your fixed expenses. If you want this to not be stressful, get your fixed expenses to where you think is a responsible amount and don't think about them. Let them come out of your account, have that in auto pay so you don't have to think about them, so you can think about your variable expenses. Measuring each month, each quarter, whatever it is for you, what it looks like to manage your variable expenses responsibly, and budgeting your fun. Having budgeting be a joy inducing activity is crucial for you to sticking around for the long term. If you don't do that, you're going to get stressed out, which is the word I'm trying to avoid, and you're probably going to stop budgeting, which is counterintuitive here. So hopefully that's helpful. This is just a primer. So if you need to reach out, if you need help in any of these areas, please feel free to reach out. Next week is going to be fun. It's kind of my personal favorite, is talking about credit cards and credit scores and what it looks like to be a good borrower. There are a bunch of different schools of thought, which all have valid views. I'm going to share kind of a facts-based approach to how credit scores are calculated, what it looks like to improve it, and then also, if you need any shock value or any controversial news for next week, is how you should be thinking about credit cards, if you should be thinking about credit cards, and if so, how you do that. So, looking forward to it. Hopefully, this week benefited you. Please feel free to reach out anytime. This is fun for me to help with. So, thanks for your time, everybody.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Lucas, did you check the chat if there were any other questions to be answered?
I did. I didn't see any other questions come in. So
Fantastic.
I think,
just making sure. All right. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for being here tonight. I'm so glad that you were. I hope you'll join us next week. Registration is available at redemptionstl.com. You're definitely going to want to make it to next week, because I think that of all the things that Lucas has talked about, I think credit has got to be one of the most overwhelming concepts. And so I'm so glad that you were here. If you're joining us through YouTube after the live version of this class, thank you for joining us. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions. We'll connect you to Lucas. He means it when he says that he'd love to help. He loves this, and he's gifted at it. He's knowledgeable about it, and he would really love to help you. So so take advantage of that if you have further questions. We would love to connect you to him. And as I said at the beginning, we would love to have you join us at Redemption for one of our services. We have a Saturday night service and a Sunday morning, and then the services are available online after the fact as well. You can join us by going to redemptionstl.com/online. Our Saturday service is at 5 o'clock and our Sunday service is at 9 a.m. We would love to see you there. But in the meantime, thank you again for joining us. I hope you register for next week's class. It's going to be great. And Lucas, thank you again so much for your time. You did a fantastic job. That was such good content, such helpful content. You explained it so clearly. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate you doing that. And Lucas, I'll see you, and we'll see the rest of you next week. Thanks for being here.
Looking forward to it. See you, Casey.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.